My brother, the golden child of the family, wrecked my car and disappeared into the night. My parents demanded that I stand in his place when the cops arrived, but they overlooked one small, crucial detail. The radiator of my Toyota Camry let out a long, agonizing hiss, like the final breath of something dying. It was the only noise in that narrow alley, apart from the fading rhythm of designer sneakers slapping against concrete somewhere in the distance. Hudson never once glanced over his shoulder. He simply bolted, his Golden Bears varsity jacket catching the glow of street lamps before he vanished around a corner like a ghost. I stood there alone, trembling in the sharp October chill, surveying the chaos he had left behind. My car, the one I had sacrificed 3 separate part-time jobs to afford, was now lodged deep inside the shattered glass facade of Lusso, the most upscale boutique in the entire city. A display mannequin wearing a designer gown worth more than a full year of my tuition lay sprawled across the crumpled hood like a fallen figure on a battlefield. My fingers fumbled for my phone to dial 911, but before I could, a black SUV came tearing around the corner and skidded to a stop just behind me. It was my parents. Either they had been tracking my location through my phone, or Hudson had dialed them mid-escape. My mother threw open her door before the vehicle had even come to a complete halt. She didn't spare me a single glance. She didn't bother to ask whether I was injured. Instead, she marched with purpose straight to the driver's side of my mangled car and leaned in to inspect. "No airbag deployment," she declared, her tone razor-sharp and analytical. "That's good. No biological traces on the bags." "Hudson could have killed an innocent person," I said, my voice cracking. My ribs throbbed where the seatbelt had cut into me during the collision. I had been sitting in the passenger seat the whole time. Hudson had insisted on getting behind the wheel, claiming he wanted to test the car's feel. He had been intoxicated naturally. Friday nights and sobriety were strangers to him. My father approached me next. He was an imposing figure, tall and broad, the type of man who dominated corporate conference rooms and youth sports sidelines with the same iron authority. He fixed me with a stare that blended disappointment with cold determination. "Blair, I need you to pay very close attention to what I'm about to say," he began, his voice descending into that low, measured tone he reserved for high-stakes negotiations. "Hudson's draft is 4 weeks away. Every scout in the league has their eyes locked on him. 1 DUI charge, 1 hit-and-run accusation, and everything crumbles. His entire future goes up in smoke." "This is his doing," I fired back, waving my hand at the field of broken glass surrounding us. "He needs to own up to it." "And what about you?" My mother cut in, spinning around to face me. Her eyes were like 2 chips of stone, utterly devoid of warmth. "What exactly do you bring to the table? A degree in English literature? You're expendable, Blair. Your brother is a once-in-a-generation talent. We've poured millions into developing his career. We will not allow you to destroy that investment over what amounts to a minor mishap." "A minor mishap?" I repeated in disbelief. "He launched a car through the front wall of a building." "Here's how this is going to work," my father said, closing the distance between us until I could smell the scotch and luxury cologne radiating off him. "You are going to stay right here. When the police arrive, you are going to tell them that you were the one driving. You'll say you swerved to dodge a stray animal in the road and lost control. You panicked." "Absolutely not," I said, shaking my head firmly. "I refuse. I'm not going to carry a criminal record so Hudson can walk free." My father's expression didn't waver. "Then here's what happens. We withdraw every cent of your college funding, effective immediately. By Monday morning, you'll be locked out of your apartment. We'll terminate your health insurance, shut off your phone, and close your access to the family emergency account. You'll have nothing, Blair. No support system, no money, no path forward. You'll be completely alone." The color drained from my face. They knew perfectly well that I was just 1 semester shy of earning my degree. They knew every dollar I had ever saved had gone into purchasing that car. They controlled every lifeline I depended on. "Decide now, Blair," my mother hissed through clenched teeth. "You can be a loyal sister, or you can be a stranger to this family." The wail of approaching sirens grew louder, and flashing red and blue lights began dancing across the brick walls of the alleyway. I looked at the demolished remains of my car, then back at the 2 people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. There was no affection in their eyes. They regarded me the way a corporation regards a disposable asset, someone whose only remaining value was to absorb the blast. "Fine," I breathed, tears burning the corners of my eyes. "I'll do it." "That's my girl," my father replied, and then he did something that shattered the last fragile shard of love I still held for him. He reached into the inner pocket of his overcoat, withdrew a polished silver flask, and twisted off the cap. "Don't move," he ordered. Before I could process what was happening, he doused me with the sharp, pungent whiskey inside. The icy liquid seeped through my hoodie and clung to my skin, saturating me in the unmistakable stench of hard liquor. "Now you're convincing," he said flatly, screwing the cap back on and meticulously wiping the flask clean with a silk handkerchief. "Remember the story. You were behind the wheel. You had been drinking. You're remorseful." He lobbed the flask through the open window and onto the passenger seat of my wrecked car. "Time to go," my mother announced, already striding back toward the SUV. "Don't ruin this." Their taillights shrank into the darkness, and I was left standing alone amidst the wreckage, reeking like a bar floor, waiting for the authorities to arrive and dismantle my life. The detention cell reeked of old urine and harsh chemical cleanser. I huddled on the frigid metal bench with my knees drawn up to my chest, still shivering in my alcohol-drenched sweatshirt. I had been photographed, fingerprinted, and processed like a street criminal. The questioning that followed had been brutal. The officers were skeptical of my fabricated story about the stray dog, but the circumstantial evidence was damning. I was drenched in the smell of whiskey, the vehicle was registered in my name, and I had openly confessed. When they administered the breathalyzer, however, I registered a perfect 0.00, which clearly puzzled them. The arresting officer simply made a note suggesting I had either metabolized the alcohol or was impaired by some other substance. They hit me with charges of reckless driving and fleeing the scene of an accident, a technical charge since the car had literally ended up inside the store and I hadn't immediately contacted emergency services. My parents posted my bail at dawn. The drive home unfolded in total silence, not the peaceful kind, but the oppressive, airless quiet of a fuse slowly burning toward detonation. The moment we stepped through the front door, the aroma of sizzling bacon and freshly brewed coffee filled my senses. Hudson was perched at the kitchen island, scrolling through his phone and chuckling at something on the screen. He looked well-rested, clean, and entirely carefree, as though the previous night had never happened. He didn't even bother raising his head when I shuffled in, looking like I had been dragged through hell and back. "You're welcome," I muttered bitterly as I walked past him. He lifted his gaze just enough to flash me a lazy grin. "Tough evening, sis. Maybe you should work on building up your tolerance." I froze mid-step, my fingers curling into tight fists at my sides. "You actually think this is amusing, Hudson? Have your breakfast, sweetheart," my mother cooed at him, setting down a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice in front of him like he was royalty. Then she turned to me, and her face transformed instantly into something cold and rigid. "Blair, go upstairs to your room. We've confiscated your phone and your laptop. You're not leaving this house until the court date." "You're grounding me? I'm a grown adult. I'm 21 years old." "You live beneath our roof and survive on our money," my father said without lifting his eyes from the morning paper. "And given the substantial legal expenses we're about to shoulder to clean up the disaster you caused, you'll follow our instructions without question." "The disaster I caused?" My voice erupted into a scream. "He's the one who destroyed my car." "Keep your voice down." My father's open palm crashed against the tabletop with a thunderous smack. "The story has already been established. You were the driver. If you contradict that narrative now, you'll face additional charges for filing a fraudulent police report and committing perjury. You've waded in too far to turn back now, Blair. Accept it." I shifted my gaze to Hudson. He gave me a wink, quick and deliberate, a silent message that said everything. "I've already won, and you've already lost." I retreated to my bedroom and crumbled onto the mattress. The following 3 days dissolved into a haze of degradation and despair. My parents retained an elite defense attorney, a slick man called Mr. Sterling, who carried the faint scent of sulfur masked by peppermints. He had zero interest in hearing my side of events. Instead, he placed a carefully crafted script in front of me. "You've been buckling under academic pressure," Sterling coached me during our rehearsals. "You turned to drinking as a way to manage the stress. This incident was essentially a desperate plea for help, Our strategy is to enter a no-contest plea and petition the court for probation, combined with a mandatory rehabilitation program. It will remain on your permanent record, but you'll stay out of prison. I don't have a drinking problem, I replied flatly. I don't need rehabilitation. You do if you intend to remain part of this family, my mother declared from the shadowy corner of the room. They were methodically tearing apart everything I was. I caught my mother on the phone with my aunt, weaving an elaborate tale about my supposed psychological unraveling and a secret battle with addiction. They were contaminating every well I might ever drink from. Even if I someday managed to speak the truth, who would take the word of the supposedly unstable alcoholic daughter over the celebrated young athlete and his distinguished parents? I felt like I was caught in a whirlpool that kept pulling me deeper with every rotation. Each time I tried to stand up for myself, they countered with threats to revoke my education funding. Every appeal I made for basic fairness was deflected with reminders of Hudson's extraordinary potential and bright future. On the fourth night of my imprisonment within those walls, I reached my lowest point. I lay flat on the cold floor of my bedroom, eyes fixed on the blank ceiling above, coming to the devastating realization that the life I had known was finished. I was destined to become the family disgrace, the cautionary tale parents whisper to their other children. Hudson would ascend to professional hockey stardom, earn millions upon millions, and I would forever be cast as the troubled sister he so generously took pity on, while quietly feeding stories about my so-called problems to journalists. Then I rolled onto my side and something on my dresser caught my eye. My car keys. The wrecked Camry had been hauled off to a salvage yard days ago, but the police had returned all personal belongings from the vehicle to my father, who had carelessly tossed them into my room. I stared at the keychain, an unremarkable plastic fob dangling from a simple ring, and in that moment, a memory surged through me like an electric current. My heart began slamming against my ribcage with such ferocity I thought my bones might splinter. I bolted upright and snatched the keys off the dresser. Just 2 weeks earlier, following a wave of vehicle break-ins near my college campus, I had invested in a dashboard camera. But this wasn't some bargain bin model. I had spent the extra money on a Vantrue N4 Pro, a premium unit equipped with front-facing cabin and rear lenses. Most critically, it featured a cloud synchronization capability that automatically uploaded footage the instant it detected a collision, as long as it could find a wireless signal. The crash had occurred directly in front of Luso, and Luso provided complimentary high-speed Wi-Fi to its patrons and passers-by. My phone had always latched onto that network automatically whenever I strolled past the storefront. The dashcam was configured to use my phone's connection settings, but could it have independently connected to the boutique's open network during the crash? I needed to find out, but I required a computer to do it. My parents had seized both my laptop and my phone, so I waited. I watched the clock crawl toward 2 a.m. When the house finally fell into deep silence, I eased my door open and slipped out, carefully stepping over the creaky floorboard in the hallway, a hazard I had committed to memory since childhood. I made my way down to the basement, to Hudson's elaborate gaming sanctuary. Hudson himself was sound asleep 2 floors above me. His enormous gaming computer sat humming softly in standby mode. I nudged the mouse, and the dual monitors blazed to life, flooding the dark room with pale blue light. I entered his password, Puck999, because my brother was the kind of person who never bothered updating something so basic. I launched a web browser in a private window and navigated to my cloud storage account. My hands were trembling so violently that I botched the password on my first 2 attempts. Then, the words appeared on screen. Access granted. I navigated to the events folder, and there, it sat waiting for me. A video file, time-stamped from 4 nights earlier at 11:42 in the evening. I pressed play. The footage opened with the violent, disorienting blur of the collision, the airbag erupting into Hudson's face, followed by an eerie beat of stillness, and then Hudson frantically clawing his way out of the vehicle. The visual was chaotic, but the audio was pristine, capturing every word and sound with startling clarity. And because the camera was equipped with a parking surveillance mode powered by an internal battery reserve, it had continued recording long after the engine had gone dead. I sat transfixed before the glowing screen. I watched my parents' black SUV roll into the frame. I listened to their entire conversation play back in perfect fidelity. My mother's clinical assessment, No airbag deployment. Good. No biological traces. My mother's devastating verdict. You are replaceable, Blair. And the crowning piece of evidence, the unmistakable high-definition image of my father removing his flask, unscrewing the cap, and deliberately dousing me in whiskey while tears streamed down my face. I had everything I needed. This was the undeniable proof. I immediately began downloading the file and knew I had to get it into trustworthy hands. Sending it to the local police was out of the question since my father regularly played golf with the police chief. I couldn't trust Mr. Sterling either. Then I thought of my Nana, my maternal grandmother, who had passed away 2 years prior, leaving behind a substantial trust fund. My parents had assumed control over it, but there was a separate estate attorney, a man named Mr. Henderson, who harbored a deep personal dislike for my father. He served as the independent executor of my grandmother's estate. I opened a new email addressed to Mr. Henderson and typed the subject line, "Evidence of fraud and coercion." I attached the video file and positioned my cursor over the send button. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" The voice shattered the silence so abruptly that I flinched hard enough to send the keyboard clattering off the desk. I whipped around to find my father standing at the foot of the basement staircase. He wasn't in his sleepwear. He was fully dressed in pressed trousers and a button-down shirt, as if sleep had never been part of his evening plans. In one hand he gripped a baseball bat, a signed memento from Hudson's Little League glory days. I fumbled for words that wouldn't come. He crossed the room with measured, unhurried steps, radiating a calm that was far more terrifying than any outburst. His eyes landed on the monitor. He saw the frozen video frame showing his own image, flask in hand, arm extended. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't erupt. He simply reached past me, pressed the power button on the computer tower, and held it down until every screen went dark. "You think you've outsmarted me," he said in barely more than a whisper. "I disabled the internet connection to this room over an hour ago. I noticed the spike in router activity through the monitoring app on my phone. You have no connection down here, Blair." My stomach plummeted. The email had never left the outbox. "Hand over the flash drive," he demanded, his eyes dropping to the USB stick I had attempted to use as a backup. "No." He took another step forward, lifting the bat just slightly, not aiming it at me but making its presence unmistakably felt. "I will reduce every electronic device in this house to rubble before I allow you to tear this family apart. Give it to me, now!" My hands shaking uncontrollably, I surrendered the small drive. He let it fall to the concrete floor and ground it to pieces beneath the heel of his polished shoe. "You have nothing now," he stated, his voice stripped of all human warmth. "No evidence, no leverage, no options. Tomorrow morning we appear in court. You will enter a guilty plea, and once the proceedings are concluded, I'm enrolling you in a locked residential treatment center out in Nevada for extended psychiatric care. You won't so much as touch a keyboard for a very, very long time." He seized my arm and hauled me up the staircase. He thrust me into my room, and the sharp metallic click of the deadbolt engaging from the outside echoed through the darkness. I slid down the wall and sat crumpled on the floor. I had made my move, and it had failed spectacularly. I was about to lose my freedom, my identity, and quite possibly my mind. They had won the game entirely.